please the sign interpreters.
Everyone is here, Claire, we can start.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our first Action Against Stunting Day. We've been working on this day for over a year, so it is such a pleasure to finally be able to welcome our panelists and our speakers and our audience. First, however, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Pauline Latham MP, who has kindly agreed to open this event. We'd like to thank Mrs. Latham for her continued support for child stunting and equally her support in sponsoring Action Against Stunting Day. Just a brief background, Pauline was elected a member of Parliament for Derbyshire in 2010. In Parliament, Mrs. Latham sits on the International Development Select Committee. The committee is currently investigating a wide range of issues important to global development, from the effectiveness of UK aid to sexual exploitation of minors. Pauline is also a member of the Joint Committee on Human Rights and a member of the Parliament's Administration Committee. Welcome, Mrs. Latham.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here today because stunting, it seems to me, is one of the most important things that often gets overlooked. And what I feel, we have lost some of the money for international development, but we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of the stunting factor, because I believe that well, first of all, girls shouldn't be getting married young, never mind having children so young, particularly if they're stunted themselves. But if they are stunted, they need to have good nutrition before they get pregnant, during their pregnancy, and then the baby needs to have good nutrition from the moment it is born. Because unless we do that and tackle that problem, we are denying many countries the opportunity to have some bright people running that country, because if it is the norm that people are stunted, we are losing out on so much that can benefit the countries in particular. And stunting has so many impacts. It impacts on leadership, it impacts on women's opportunities to work in the economic market so that they can bring in some money into the household and educate their children. And it becomes a vicious circle. So I'm very keen to support anything that I can do within international development to help these people who actually are suffering. Sorry about the bells, but they are just testing some bells here at the moment. But I do feel it's one of the most important things that is so often overlooked by many people. We're going to be doing a study on nutrition, in which we are going to be looking at stunting in the next year or so. And I think that's something that's very important. I hope that everybody will look out for that. And we'll put in some evidence to the committee, because we accept written evidence from anybody who wishes to. And I think that will then inform our report when we eventually do it. But it is such an important thing. Around the world, in developing countries, I mean, I'm sure there's a case in some non-developing countries, developed countries, who also have problems, but it is particularly prevalent in developing countries and in war-torn countries where there is food insecurity. So I believe that having this conference is an amazing idea to bring so many people together, and I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I thought I would just give a very brief introduction to the day, and then, because we're very tight on time, and then over to our first panelists. So Chelsea, can you share my slides, please? And the next slide, please. Oops, that was a bit fast, sorry. Yeah, welcome, there's one more. Well, we have a range of other events that are happening today and into the autumn. So we're really viewing this day as a beginning. For example, in Senegal, our team is working with a range of radio stations to broadcast messages about the day and to share information about stunting. We're also implementing a range of community dialogues over the next few months, working with religious leaders, women and volunteers, and developing community action plans regarding child stunting. In India, the India team has been really working hard with television, radio, and print media. The day is being covered in a range of news articles, and All India Radio is broadcasting an interview. In Indonesia, we're hosting workshops in addition to a social media competition for Indonesian secondary school students, and we can't wait to see the outcome of that. And of course, finally, in the UK, we've developed a range of resources for teachers and students, and we're sharing this material across a variety of platforms, and the team is working with individual schools. Now, our events over the autumn will be advertised on our website, in our newsletters, and on our social media channels, so please do follow us. So what are our objectives? Next slide, please, Chelsea. We want to engage in new audiences, and we want to raise awareness of child stunting at the community, national, and global levels. We want to contribute to this dialogue on the commitments needed to get the global goals back on track. And we want to look at ways that we can move this dialogue into action. Next slide, please. Oops, I think this one was a bit somehow. Okay, next slide, please. So, I think there was general agreement at the time that meeting the targets outlined in the SDGs were always going to be a challenge. And before the pandemic, and I know our speakers are going to talk a lot more about this, SDG 2 was the worst performing indicator in East and South Asia, universally underperforming in South Africa and much of Latin America and the Caribbean. So previous gains were looking increasingly unstable. And there was a whole variety of reasons in the literature offered for this, but one of the primary ones that we kept coming back to was about investment. Next slide, please. And it's true, if you look at investment of child stunting in the early years of the decade, interventions were being funded to the tune about around $500 million a year. So clearly this was never going to be sufficient. So when we had the opportunity to really kind of boost investment in child stunting to support these goals, I think we arguably kind of missed the boat a little bit. And now we've got the pandemic. Now, next slide, please. The unequal impact of the pandemic on the lives of vulnerable children is becoming increasingly apparent, from a recent study in the Lancet outlining the number of pandemic orphans to the impact on education, healthcare, school feeding, household food security. Direct evidence is starting to emerge. But at the disease level, COVID-19 is frequently referred to as a syndemic. And a syndemic is a set of linked health problems involving two or more diseases or syndromes interacting synergistically to contribute to the excess burden of disease. And of course, at the macro level, the pandemic itself is synergistic to both the other global challenges and indeed the broad range of drivers to child stunting. Next slide, please. So the pandemic in combination with climate change, food systems crisis is magnifying all of these previous inequalities. So in essence, we're really seeing another form of a syndemic. Next slide, please. So where does this leave us? And by us, I'm referring to this global community of practice. How do we respond to this? The pandemic has effectively stepped on the proverbial gas pedal of nutritional vulnerability among communities, households, families, and children that were already at risk. And here I think we need to be a bit self-reflective, and I think there's a lot of positives. Next slide, please. Oops. I think that we're, probably the most networked that we've ever been, and there's been a wide variety of platforms to join up stakeholder communities. We're certainly the most collaborative we've ever been. There's critical recognition that child stunting will not be solved by single disciplinary perspectives. So there's really tangible support now for interdisciplinarity. Gaps in funding have been recognized, and we're developing new and innovative funding mechanisms. We probably have the most amount of data and platforms for data sharing. And I would argue that as a community, we are probably the most self-aware than in previous decades. And that sort of evidence for that is, if you ever have time, go back and look at some of the papers produced on child malnutrition during the 1960s. So we are keen for our event today and the very first Action Against Stunting Day to re-energize and refocus the discussion around the solution to child malnutrition. And we've divided the day into 3 parts. In the first session, we've asked a variety of global voices to take us through these issues, from the pandemic to the global goals, to the crisis in global food systems, to new investment mechanisms. And in the second session, we have researchers and policymakers from our 3 Action Against Stunting countries to take us through what's happening on the ground and how these critical issues are playing out at the national and community level. And finally, we're having a roundtable discussion. And here, we're asking participants to speak to these issues, to propose actions, and to discuss a way forward. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Francesco Branca. Francesco is the Director of the Development of Nutrition for Health and Development at WHO, the Department for Nutrition and Health of Development at WHO. Welcome, Francesco.
Well, good morning to all, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you. It seems yesterday that you were here at WHO to launch this fascinating and enthusiastic project, and I must also not only congratulate for the project, but congratulate for the vision of the UK government for having placed so much importance to it. But unfortunately, my task today is to start with the sobering note of taking, unfortunately, the impact of the pandemic on the efforts to reduce stunting and all forms of malnutrition. So what has happened during the pandemic? And first of all, the impact was on food insecurity. And we have described a lot of disruptions along the food supply chains, but also restriction of movement that stop people from actually getting access to food. Prices have changed and have increased in countries that were depending on imports. People have lost their jobs, and incomes and livelihoods have been affected. Social protection mechanisms, think simply, for example, of school food programs, have been disrupted. So this was going to produce an impact, and the state of food security and nutrition in the world has calculated this impact. Unfortunately, we still do not have clear data, so that these are largely estimates, but the scenario for 2020 has been a sudden increase almost everywhere in the number of people affected by food insecurity. And we've also been looking at the projection of what this might mean for the next 10 years. And this effect is going to stay. So the projected decrease in food insecurity over the next decade is going to be affected. So we're going to see this really long-lasting effect of the pandemics basically in all the region. But there's been another unfortunate component here, and that's been the disruption of childcare and antenatal care services and community care activities. Health workers have been basically hijacked to deal with the pandemic. But then also the systems in general have been disrupted. Medicines have been missing. People have been avoiding to go to health services. The economic situation stopped. In many cases, insurance coverage, all the outreach programs have been interrupted. And if you think of vitamin A vaccination campaigns, WHO has been running continuously analysis of the state of the art of the services, and this is the latest one. This was April 21 publication, so what has happened in the first trimester of this year. And unfortunately, as you can see, the disruption is still there. And if you look at, of course, the management of moderate and severe malnutrition, which seems to have an immediate impact, still, some countries say that over 50% of the disruption is there, but the lower level of the disruption is there, and about half of the countries indicate that they're not able to provide the same quality and level of services at a time when we would have needed a much greater investment there. But not only that, antenatal care, sick child services, and then we talked about the immunization, all has been disrupted. So the outcome of this, and I'm really congratulating Lawrence and the team of the consortium, actually, of Standing Together for Nutrition, to have kept this analysis really updated. There's been a combination of the decrease in gross national income, the impact on food insecurity, and the health service disruption, with an estimated average reduction of gross national income of 6% and an additional 3% in 2021. So there's a lot more people that are probably being thrown into extreme poverty as a result of this. So this GNI decrease plus the health service disruption, let's say the figure there has been 30% overall reduction in the coverage of essential nutrition services as of 2021. The calculation there was 9.3 million additional children that have gone into waste into 2020 to 2022. We've done a calculation of what this might have meant for stunting as well, and if wasting has had basically an acute increase, stunting has also had an increase. And again, these conditions are going to be long-lasting, and there have been, of course, different scenarios of impact, and countries have been able to cope with the impact of this phenomenon in a different way. But even in the moderate impact scenario, you can see that we're talking about anything from 5 to 7 million children stunted by 2030. And looking at the accumulation of this data, we're talking about 16 to 40 million cases of children in the next decade. So that is definitely a major impact. I would say it's a tragedy in the tragedy. I must say that in addition to this, we also have had an impact on the other aspects of malnutrition. And just to mention one, which is also affecting high-income countries, it's obesity. So we've started to look at the recommendations for action of the Ending Childhood Obesity Commission, and we said, okay, what has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? And you basically have a long list of impacts. The reduced access to fresh food, reduced mobility for children, increased screen time, reduced access to care. The messages discouraging breastfeeding, there's been really an unscrupulous move from some of the breast milk manufacturers to take advantage and promote the use of breast milk substitutes. And then, as we said, the disruption of school feeding program, the reduced access to counseling services, even obesity has been affected. And we're starting to see actually the hard data about that. This is a study done in Europe where you see really that during COVID-19 era, children, adolescents, and young adults gain weight. So this was exactly because of the disruption of the dietary and other behaviors, because of the restricted movement. But we do have documentation that has been an impact. And is this going to be also long-lasting? Probably. Last year, in support of this global call for action, the Director Generals of FAO, UNICEF, WHO, and WFP really called for action on 5 urgent actions to protect children's right to nutrition during the pandemic, and reiterating the need to safeguard and promote access to nutrition, safe and affordable diet, invest in improving maternal and child nutrition through pregnancy, infants, and early childhood, reactivate and scale up the services for detection and treatment of child wasting, maintain the provision of nutrition and safe school meals for vulnerable children, and expand social protection to safeguard access to nutrition, diets, and essential services. So these are 5 key elements that we need to not only resume, but scale up. So against this long-lasting effect of the pandemic, we need a much greater and long-lasting investment. We have opportunities this year of 2 summits addressing this. We need to take this opportunity and have adequate policy and financial commitment to turn the tide. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and listening to other colleagues. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that. So our next speaker, moving on, is Dr. Lawrence Haddad. He's the Executive Director of GAIN. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you, Claire. Great to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I get the right slides. It's great to be here. Thank you for your leadership in organizing this session. Thank you for inviting me to participate. The exam question that Claire gave me was, can we still reach the global goals for stunting reduction? So this is my cover picture, and it's a picture that shows kids in India, and it says, that line, which is the horizontal line, has how tall. That's what the median height should be for eight-year-olds, wherever they are in the world, really. And you can see that all of these Indian kids are way below that median height. Now, why does that matter? Do we really care that much about height? We care about it because height is a marker. And it's a marker for cognitive development and physical development and the immune system development. We know, for example, 45% of all deaths under 3 are linked to undernutrition. That's extraordinary. We know that stunted children are less likely to go to school, less likely to complete school, and less likely to learn even when they're in school. And we know that stunted kids are 30% more likely to live in poverty as adults. So the stunting is no joke. It's nothing to joke about. It's very serious. It damages the longevity, the livelihoods, and the livelihoods and everything about the kids' life chances and life course. Now, it's not surprising, because think about what the weight of a brain is of a healthy individual. At birth, it's 400 grams. So this is a rather whimsical picture of a can of tomatoes, which weighs 400 grams. That's at birth. At 1 year of age, the brain weighs twice that. So 2 cans. And for us as adults, it's 3 cans. It's 1.2 kilograms. So you can see the incredible growth and development of the brain in the womb and in the first year or 2 of life. So anything that disrupts that, whether it's poor healthcare, poor sanitation, poor water, poor food, that's going to have lifelong consequences. It's almost like anything that disrupts the drying of concrete. That is a big chunk of that is irreversible. And here's the slightly more technical explanation of what's going on. And here you can see that this just shows you when are the sensory pathways being developed, when is language skill being developed, and when a higher cognitive function being developed. And you can see a lot of it is happening prior to birth and in that first year and 2 years of life. So this is what's going on. This is being disrupted. So it's very, very serious consequences. We are off track, as Claire said, to meet the stunting goals. This is from the Global Nutrition Report 2020. We can see that of the countries that have data for stunting that allow us to measure trends, 31 are on course. That's great to meet those global goals. 28 are off course, but at least showing some progress. 17 are showing no progress or actually worsening. And for most of them, we don't have the data to tell what's really going on, 118 countries. Now, those numbers were pre-COVID, and as Francesco has mentioned very well, COVID is a massive shock. Why is it a massive shock? Well, it's a massive shock because of food disruption and healthcare disruption and health system disruption. But just look at this. Look at the impact on poverty. These are numbers from the World Bank. And each year, this shows you the decrease in poverty numbers. The only years where there was an increase was in 97 and 98. That was the Asian financial crisis. And we had 18 million and 47 million. But in every other year, there's been a decrease in the number of people living in poverty. But look at 2020, another 88 million people. This is as of January 21, projected to be living in poverty. And that's going to have a massive impact on malnutrition. And in fact, of course, it is. If you look at the numbers of stunted kids in 2000, it's about 198 million, and the decrease is about 2.6 million a year. It's slightly different from Claire's number, but basically in the same ballpark. And we got to about 149 million in 2019. And at that same rate of progress, we would have expected to get to about 141 million at the end of 2022 without COVID. But of course, with COVID, the estimates in this paper by Saskia Ozendarp, that's the lead author that I was involved in, came out in Nature Food last month, is projecting in a worst case scenario, and I think we're in worst case scenario territory with 2% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa vaccinated. It shows an increase from 149 to 153, but of course that really is a net difference of 12 million, because we're really looking at 153 versus 141. So very, very serious. So what are the opportunities to change things? I think these are three big opportunities: COVID, climate, and summits. COVID, why is COVID an opportunity? Well, Francesco presented some updated numbers. These numbers are sort of from June 2020 from UNICEF, and they showed that essentially health, nutrition interventions delivered through the health system have been severely disrupted. And the numbers are the number of countries. The darker number means more severely disrupted. So the red is really very severe disruption, and the yellow is still disrupted, but less so. And this shows you this is for 7 essential nutrition interventions delivered through the health system. We need to make nutrition intervention and investment in nutrition interventions, and essential nutrition interventions, a default part of the COVID response. Why is that? COVID vaccination rates are 2% in Africa. COVID takes advantage of comorbidities in terms of the severity, and good nutrition is vital to strong immune systems. So we should be pushing very hard for this. I'm sure WHO is and UNICEF are. We need to support them to do this. Number 2, still on COVID, what's happened with COVID is because there's been so much poverty, social protection programs have expanded brilliantly to pick up at least some of the slack, to deliver cash, mostly cash, sometimes food, to families that are really in dire straits. And these numbers just basically show you the number of people covered and the number of countries that are implementing these kinds of programs and the number of measures. So everything's going up, but a very few of these programs are linked to nutrition, either on the consumption side or the production side. It's a massive missed opportunity. It's not classified as nutrition funding, but we should make it nutrition funding. Climate, it's a crisis and an opportunity. Look at the funding flows from in climate. This is from countries to countries. On the left is from, on the right is to. Just look at some of the numbers. EU institutions $5 billion, $4.5 billion. That's basically about the entire budget for ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, to nutrition. The last time I looked, which was about a year ago, $1 billion or so goes to, of ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, goes to direct nutrition interventions that are delivered through the health system, and maybe another 5 billion goes to nutrition sensitive programs. So let's say 6 through ODA. Look at these numbers on the left. They absolutely dwarf nutrition financing. How can we get some of that climate financing into the nutrition space? We know that the diets of young children in low income settings need more animal source food. How can we work with climate leaders to find climate smart ways of increasing animal source food production that meets climate goals and meets nutrition goals? That's the challenge in front of us. The third opportunity is the Food System Summit and the Nutrition for Growth Summit. Both big opportunities, and Gunhild and I and Francesco and FAO and WFP and IFAD and UNICEF are all working hard to make these summits work for nutrition. But the pledges are, I think, fairly simple. I think we need to at least double spending on malnutrition. And I mean, governments need to double it. Donors need to double it, and innovative financing needs to double it. And I know we have the Power of Nutrition coming on later with Simon. Doubling is the minimum. And that's, you know, the amount of money we're talking about is really, it's pitiful compared to the benefits we get and compared to what other sectors and other issues get. But we know that money is in short supply because of COVID and climate. So we have to find ways, as I've suggested, of using COVID and climate funds to do that. Just to remind you that investing in nutrition is incredibly, I mean, as well as being the right thing to do, it's incredibly smart investment. These are some numbers from the Global Nutrition Report from 5 or 6 years ago, which show you the benefit cost ratios of scaling up essential nutrition programs to 90%. The benefit cost ratios, the median across all of these 40 countries is 16. And for some countries, you can see it's many more than 16. And that actually is a better performance, a better return to investment. That outperforms the Dow Jones Index over the past 80 years. It's an incredibly good investment from a purely economic sense. But of course, this isn't just about economics. This is about kids and people and rights. There are plenty of resources around. Can we reach the global goals for 2030? Of course we can. There are plenty of resources around. We have to make them work for stunting reduction. We need to be more creative. We, being this community on the line, we need to be more creative, more opportunistic, and even more determined. Let's deny COVID-19 this terrible intergenerational legacy, and let's not abandon these kids when they need us the most. Thank you, Claire. Back to you.
Thank you very much for that. That was great. Thank you. So our next speaker is Dr. Gunhild Stordeling. She is founder and executive chair of EAT, and she's also the founding director of the Stordeling Foundation. Welcome, Gunhild.
Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. Great to be here with you all on this important day. And congratulations again on this really important initiative. So Claire, as well as my good friends, Lawrence and Francesco, these are, as you all know, some of the world's leading experts on these topics, have already explained where we are in the fights against hunger. And it's abundantly clear that we are not in a good place. As they have said, we are failing massively, and with COVID-19, even more so. And they have also talked about what actions against stunting actually look like and the kind of interventions we need. And Lawrence also touched upon the investment needs as well as the links to climate. So allow me therefore to zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture when it comes to our food systems, and in particular, the major systemic challenges that we have to tackle in order to have a fighting chance of defeating malnutrition for good. So over the last many decades, we made enormous progress, as you all know, in terms of feeding the world. And even with the massive population growth we witnessed, the green revolution, the convergence of nature into cropland, and the more and more industrialized production methods more than kept pace with demography. And by 2015 or so, hunger and undernutrition were at the lowest levels probably ever seen in human history. And back then, many were convinced that victory against hunger were within relatively close reach, and that if we just focused our attention on the remaining pockets of undernutrition in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, we would get there. Of course, many of these same people were well aware of both climate change as a major threat to food security, of the many environmental problems related to modern food production, of the rapid rise in diet-related diseases driven by the spread of cheap and healthy foods, etc. But still, it was kind of assumed that we could continue to progress in tackling undernutrition without getting too distracted by these other problems. Today, it's different. Today, we know that we are in for a longer, harder battle, and that it's going to be complicated, to put it mildly, to conquer hunger, stunting, and indeed all forms of malnutrition for good. Not only are the numbers now trending in the wrong direction, with hunger once again on the rise, but the science is telling us loud and clear that unless we fundamentally transform how we go about producing and consuming food in our world, and get that seriously underway in this decade, we run a very high risk of new pandemics, but most importantly, completely destabilizing the planet itself, and hence also our food systems. And if that happens, we will be destabilizing human civilization itself. And in that world, hunger, stunting, undernutrition will be the new normal. It will become yet again entwined with the human condition almost everywhere. So what exactly is it with our food systems that has to be transformed? Well, first of all, we need to transform how we go about producing food. So rather than depleting our soils for nutrients and destroying natural ecosystems, we need to start working with nature. So we need regenerative, nature-positive ways to grow and harvest crops and seafoods within safe environmental limits, or so-called planetary boundaries, so that we are able to sustain the web of life that we depend on. And it's absolutely essential that we learn how to produce foods in ways that allow our soils or our forests and oceans to absorb massive amounts of carbon, rather than emitting a quarter of all greenhouse gases like food systems are doing today. And it goes without saying that our farmers and fishers, they will need massive assistance in order to be able to undertake this shift. The good news is that this massive shifts in production modalities can actually boost livelihoods if we do it wisely. It can make vulnerable rural areas far more resilient in facing already unavoidable climate change, like we have seen more than ever this summer. And this shift also directly implies a diversification of production away from only a few crops, away from monoculture agricultural, which is the majority today. And this is important in order to improve access and affordability to healthy, nutritious diets, instead of the current situation where we are relying on just a few crops, 12 plants, and some 5 animal species as sources of meat. Something which is really at the heart of the epidemic of diet-related diseases that we are seeing spreading around the world. The second thing we need is a shift of consumption patterns, as our consumption patterns are also directly contributing to the problems that we are now facing. And here we in the Western world, and indeed the more affluent populations worldwide, have a particular responsibility. It is a responsibility of our policymakers in particular, but food industry must also step up and take much more responsibility here. And of course, we need to do a much better job at building public awareness and bottom-up demand for change. To be a bit more specific, what we need is really a dramatic increase in the diversity, availability, accessibility, and affordability of especially legumes, nuts, whole grains, and not at least fresh vegetables and fruits. And at the global level, and particularly with respect to more affluent populations, we need to curb overconsumption of animal-sourced foods, especially red meats, and we need to increase consumption of healthy plant-rich diets. And when it comes to meat and animal-sourced foods, we need to move away from high intensive industrial operations to more free-ranged and regenerative production practices, also in the context of reducing risks for new pandemics. Finally, we also need to see a reduction in consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and foods high in unhealthy fats, free sugars, and salt. And finally, and thirdly, we need to cut by at least half the amounts of food that we lose and waste, somewhere between farm and fork today. And it's really completely unethical that we waste up to a third of everything we produce in a world where hunger rates is going up. So this has to stop. So what I'm trying to say here is that this decade, the decade of the 2020s, must be a decade of transformation in order to steer clear of tipping points of no return. And this is why this year's UN Food System Summits, as well as Nutrition for Growth, COP in Glasgow, CBD COP, etc., is such an historic opportunity to hit the reset button and really kickstart the great food transformation. So by 2030, we can and we must live in a world in which our food systems are driving progress towards net zero emissions, becoming carbon sinks, and that they also are driving progress towards reduced rates of biodiversity losses, improved public health, sharply reduced risks of new pandemics, and also ensuring vibrant rural communities. So just think about this for a second. Yes, the challenges and the complexity are immense, but our food systems are first and foremost, I would say, an incredibly opportunity space for us as humanity. So if we make the right decisions now, we can make incredible gains towards achieving all the SDGs, of achieving the Paris climate commitments, the biodiversity targets, and we will have a fighting chance at defeating all forms of malnutrition, including stunting, including hunger, and doing it for good, not just for a short period of our history. So it's near impossible for me to exaggerate how important this moment is. How we go about producing and consuming food in our world over the coming decades will basically determine the future of humanity. So finally, what we need and what we must demand is this: real and strong commitments and action at many levels and by many actors, national and local governments, international organizations, business along the value chain of food, the financial sector, health and education, and yes, of course, people as consumers and citizens, meaning all of us. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Gunhild. That was a really powerful piece. Thank you for that. So our last speaker is Simon Bishop. He is the CEO of The Power of Nutrition. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I was asked today to talk about finance in nutrition and how we increase finance. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm afraid no PowerPoint. There's a $7 billion a year gap in funding if we are going to eradicate stunting and wasting and other forms of malnutrition. It's probably with COVID closer to 8.2 billion. And at the heart of the Power of Nutrition's mandate is to try and help the global nutrition sector to close that gap. The harsh reality is that the traditional grant aid space is shrinking in this area. I'm totally supportive of Lawrence's comments that we need to make the case that tackling nutrition should be absolutely at the heart of the COVID response and climate change response, and that would potentially help increase traditional grant aid into the space. But I think we also have to acknowledge, it's getting tough, right? And we've seen that in our own country with FCDO cuts, and we will advocate with others in the sector that FCDO goes back to 0.7 as quickly as possible, including continuing its global decade of fantastic global leadership in nutrition. But I think we have to acknowledge that's going to be tough. Similarly, we will advocate with the sector for bilaterals and other donors around the world to make big N4G commitments. However, if you recognise nutritional grant aid is at best flatlining into nutrition, but probably actually in decline, and the figures lag a couple of years, so we're not certain it's in decline. But you look at FCDO cuts and the direction of travel of other big traditional nutrition donors, it doesn't look positive. So one of the things we are exploring at the moment and keen to work with other partners in the sector on, so please get in touch afterwards if you'd like to work together on this, is to very much explore the rapidly expanding innovative financing space. The opportunities here are potentially huge. If you look at impact investing, 50 million went into impact investing in 2007. In 2020, 50 billion, sorry. In 2020, it was 751 billion. We've now seen $3 trillion flow into so-called ESG investments. These are, companies and investors, increasingly their performance is measured just not on their bottom line, but also on their environmental and social and governance track record. That's $3 trillion has flown in, including $1 trillion in the last year alone. If we can attract just a fraction of that to nutrition, then we could start to plug a sizable chunk of that 8.2 billion gap a year. And what we need to do in essence is huge amounts of money are flowing into the E, environment for climate change, a lot less into the S, the social. And I think there's a job to be done to ensure that when companies, investors, advisors, ESG teams, across corporates, in investors, particularly progressive investors, and many of those are based here in London, of course, as a global financial centre, that when they think about the S and how they could meet those S commitments, that nutrition is right in there, alongside health and education and other bigger areas. If we do this, we think there's a real opportunity to plug the gap. It's also worth saying, if we don't do this, then there is a real risk we will replicate our traditional grant aid orphan status that we've arguably had for the last 40 years. Nowhere near enough money going into nutritional, despite it being foundational. We'll replicate that orphan status in the innovative financing space. And we are already on orphan track. If you look at, there's 630 green bonds. There's been only 2 nutrition bonds. There are 5 impact funds for health. There are no nutrition impact funds. In terms of social impact bonds and development impact bonds, there are about 150 around the world. 30 of them, 31 I think, are health, 24 education. There's only 1 nutrition. So we are already on orphan track in this innovative financing space. The argument we're therefore making is we want to work with others in the nutrition sector to go big and bold, to turn ourselves from orphans into pioneers, where you have the education sector phoning us up saying, how on earth have you catalyzed that amazing financial mechanism or got that new flow of investment and money flowing? That is actually much easier to do in a nascent market. You know, the innovative finance really only been around for 10 or 15 years than it is in a traditional grant aid space that's been around for decades, and where it's very hard to to get a voice and raise money when you unfortunately, and competition is a terrible thing, but when you're up against limited resources and other sectors frankly have a much bigger arsenal than we do. But in the innovative financing space that's so nascent, there is a real opportunity for us to actually, as I say, turn ourselves from an orphan into a pioneer. And I think this is very exciting and has an awful lot of potential. It won't be easy. Innovative financing is complex. A lot of it is not relevant to nutrition. So this is no silver bullet. But nevertheless, we think there is a real opportunity here. And as I say, we're keen to work with other partners to explore that in a big and bold way, not dabbling, not in a little way, because that is not going to be enough, in a big and bold way in the years ahead. And if we can do that successfully, if we can get that money flowing, then that could make a really positive contribution to filling that 8.2 annual financing gap. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Simon. That was great. So I'd like to really thank our speakers this morning, Francesco, Lawrence, Gunhild, and Simon, for really laying down the gauntlet of what needs to be done and telling us how we should do it. So, thank you very much. It's been an absolutely brilliant first session. So we're going to have a small break because I know we're actually okay on time, but we're going to have a small break now, demonstrate some of the school's materials, and then we're going to move into the country session. But honestly, brilliant presentations. Thank you so much. So Alessia, do you want to give us some timings for the next session?
Yes, we can come back at 11 UK time.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so we'll see you back at 11.
Hi, Claire. Hello, Claire. Perfect. We're ready to start.
Okay, who's going to go first? Is it Bharati? And does Bharati know she's going to introduce her?
Claire, we are live.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I'd like to welcome Bharati Kulkarni. She's the country lead for India and for the UK Action Against Stunting Hub. Welcome, Bharati. And her other day job is that she's a senior grade deputy director at the National Institute of Nutrition in Hyderabad, India. Welcome, Bharati.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to present about Action Against Stunting in India. Undernutrition in children has been a problem in India, and as we see from the anthropometric indicators, there has been some progress in reducing child stunting, which during the National Family Health Survey third round, which was conducted during 2005-06, and the fourth round of National Family Health Survey, which was conducted during 2015-16, there was a reduction in prevalence of stunting by 10 percentage point. But when we look at the mean increment in height for age Z-score, it improved over a decade by 0.4 ST. And when we put it into the perspective, the World Bank estimates show that real per capita GDP doubled during this time. So this progress looks quite modest. We know that child stunting is at the center of double burden of malnutrition, which is faced by countries undergoing nutrition transition, including India as well as other countries. Maternal undernutrition, which leads to reduced size at birth and reduced childhood growth, leads to altered body composition and leading to reduced muscle mass during adulthood. And it has consequences including impaired fat oxidation, poor physical activity, reduced resting energy expenditure, and this increases the risk of cardiometabolic diseases. And we know that it's influenced by developmental programming, including epigenetic changes, as well as accumulation of risk during life course, which involves suboptimal diets, as well as inflammation and infections, which are common in unhygienic surroundings. Keeping in view of the importance of reducing childhood stunting, National Nutrition Mission started in 2017-18. It's labeled as Poshan Abhiyan, has an explicit focus on reducing child stunting by at least 10% per annum from the baseline of 38% prevalence, and aim is to strive to achieve 25% prevalence by 2022. And it has a strong focus on first 1,000 days. Poshan Abhiyan has strong emphasis on intersectoral convergence, and it stands on pillars of technology for monitoring progress, convergence of different departments and ministries which are relevant for nutrition, behavioral change communication, as well as capacity building. Convergence is really at the heart of National Nutrition Mission. And as per the Prime Minister's call, people's participation is important, and people's movement, that is Jana Andolan, focuses on behavioral change communication messages focused on first 1,000 days of life, including overall nutrition healthy foods and care of pregnant women, or importance of optimal breastfeeding, complementary food and feeding practices, immunization, growth monitoring, anemia prevalence, diarrhea management, girls' education, improving hygiene, sanitation, safe drinking water, as well as early childhood care and education. Apart from the Poshan Abhiyan, which is nationwide, there are also state-level programs. For example, in the state of Telangana, where our center is located, there is a program which provides one full meal to pregnant women, which provides almost 1,200 calories and 37 grams of protein. And there is an important focus on animal source foods, including eggs and milk. Apart from the provision of supplemental nutrition, it offers opportunity for monitoring gestational weight gain, health and nutrition counseling, as well as iron folate supplementation. Apart from these state programs, there are vibrant civil society groups working in India, where the focus is on nutrition, livelihoods, as well as agriculture, which are relevant for nutrition. We are yet to see the results of these initiatives. We have seen tremendous momentum for improving child nutrition and stunting, but the data is yet to show the results. For example, the first phase of National Family Health Survey data, where only the fact sheet data is available from 22 states and union territories, does not show improvement in all the states on reduction in stunting. Some states such as Bihar have shown remarkable progress, whereas we do not see similar progress in other states. On the other hand, we see significant progress on other health indicators, including reduction in neonatal mortality rate, infant mortality rate, improvement in institutional birth, improvement in proportion of children who are fully immunized. There is also remarkable progress on the proportion of pregnant women consuming iron folate tablets, proportion of pregnant women who get their antenatal checkup in the first trimester. So there is improvement in health indicators, but we are yet to see the improvement in nutritional indicators. So in 2021, the National Nutrition Mission has been strengthened in the form of Poshan Mission 2.0. And here the focus is to strengthen nutritional content, delivery, outreach, and outcomes. And in Mission 2.0, the aim is to merge the supplementary nutrition programs as well as the National Nutrition Mission, that is Poshan Abhiyan, where the focus is on influencing behavior changes and growth monitoring through technology. The aim is to intensify strategy to improve nutritional outcomes across 112 aspirational districts. And there is Poshan Tracker, software to enable real-time monitoring and tracking of the ICDS centers, frontline workers, and beneficiaries on the defined indicators. But despite all these interventions, we need deeper understanding of stunting biology to make progress on stunting. We need assessment of the impact of undernutrition beyond body size. Cognition is extremely important and important component of the Action Against Stunting Hub as an outcome. We also need better understanding on intergenerational effects. We know that growth faltering starts in utero, and even the children, even the infants who are exclusively breastfed, there is significant growth faltering occurring in the first 6 months. We need better understanding of the breast milk composition and to understand why the growth faltering occurs during the period of exclusive breastfeeding. We need better understanding on synergies, interactions, relative strengths, and directionality between the drivers of stunting, including those in the biological, behavioral, environmental, and social domains. We also need to understand the role of context-specific interventions to interrupt the stunting cascade across the first 1,000 days. And for this, we need interdisciplinary research to unpack the complexity by examining the etiology of stunting and ways to ameliorate stunting in an integrated manner. I believe that Action Against Stunting Hub is uniquely positioned to assess the convergence of different determinants at individual level and also contribute knowledge and support the National Nutrition Mission in India. And this group of colleagues from 3 countries, we have recently started the cohort study, and where detailed measurement of determinants from different domains is being done. And I believe we will be able to contribute to a better understanding of stunting biology. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Bharati. That was really a great overview. And please introduce your policymaker now.
Claire, unfortunately, the policymaker from India couldn't make the meeting today. So,
Unfortunately. Yes. Okay, no worries. All right. So our next speaker is Dr. Umi Famita, the country lead for Indonesia. Umi is a senior academic staff at Semio Regional Center for Food and Nutrition, Semio Rekfan. Welcome, Umi.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Greetings from Indonesia. And it is my pleasure and our pleasure as Action Against Stunting Hub team from Indonesia to join this first Action Against Stunting Day. And we are also honored to join this to share the voice from Indonesia because in Indonesia now, we are really committed for the stunting conversion for not only stunting reduction, but also acceleration of stunting reduction. So we implement holistic, integrated, and quality multi-sectoral collaboration. And this role is directly led by the Vice President as the advisory board and by the National Population and Family Planning Board or BKKBN. So it is really a pleasure that we have now representing the National Population and Family Planning Board of Indonesia, Dr. Hasto Wardoyo, represented by Professor Rijal Damanik, to share about this stunting reduction, the acceleration of stunting reduction in Indonesia. Dr. Rijal Damanik is the head of this deputy of the training, research and development of the board. And he will also be joined by Dr. Irma Ardiana, who is the head of the research development of the board. So Prof. Rijal and Ibu Irma will continue further, and let me share the screen. Prof. Rijal, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Umi, for a nice introduction. Good afternoon from Jakarta, Indonesia, and good morning in the United Kingdom. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, dear colleagues and friends from across the world, on behalf of the government of Indonesia, I'd like to extend my highest appreciation to this first Action Against Stunting Day, which bring together policymakers, donors, and academia all over the world to promote research and interventions to ensure that every child can reach their full potential. Stunting reduction is a national priority of the government of Indonesia. It is directly led by the Vice President in an advisory role and by Chairman of National Population and Family Planning Board, or BKKBN, stand for Badan Kependudukan dan Keluarga Berencana Nasional, in an executive role. We work in close coordination with the National Planning Board, coordinating Ministry for Human Development and Cultural Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of International Affairs and Vice President Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia has set the target to accelerate stunting reduction to 14% by 2024, and Task Force on Stunting Reduction is formed from central to village levels. This team has a role to coordinate, synergize, and evaluate the implementation of the acceleration of stunting reduction in their areas. The National Strategy for Acceleration of Stunting Reduction serves as the primary framework for all elements of the states. We implement 5 pillars consisting of first, strengthening leaders' commitment and vision at ministries, institutions at the central, provincial, district, and village levels. Second, improving behavior change communication and community empowerment. And third, strengthening the convergence of nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive interventions. And fourth, improving food and nutrition security at the individual and family and community levels. And the fifth pillars is strengthening and developing systems, data, information, research, and innovations. That's all I have for now. For more detailed information on stunting situation, programs, and challenges in Indonesia will be presented by Dr. Irma Ardiana. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Back to you, Dr. Umi, to be continued by Dr. Irma Ardiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Damanik, for the opportunity given. Allow me to continue. Next slide. Prevalence of stunting in Indonesia for the last 5 years, 2015-2019, has fluctuated. During this period, the average of reduction was 0.3%. In 2019, 1 out of 4 children is stunting. Indonesia has set the target for stunting reduction in its National Medium-Term Development Plan 2020-2024 to be at 14% in 2024. It aligns with SDGs target. The target setting demands an acceleration of stunting reduction per annum even further in the context of pandemic COVID-19. Next. There is a huge discrepancy in the prevalence of stunting across provinces. Some provinces are in the category very high, above 30%. Some are high, between 20 and below 30%. The figure shows us a unique pattern in which some provinces, such as Jakarta and Yogyakarta, have succeeded to catch up its unfavorable condition of having baby born stunted by emphasizing the first 1,000 days of life. Next, to measure the performance of national program, we create specific index for stunting reduction at nationwide and at provincial level. It is evaluated each year and constructed under 6 dimensions, namely health, nutrition, housing, food, education, and social protection, and comprise 12 indicators. For the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, we have improved the performance by having an increase 2.16 point. Next, based on scientific evidence and Indonesia's situation, we have determined 9 powerful indicators for nutrition-specific interventions and 11 indicators for nutrition-sensitive intervention. We do realize that the most common bottleneck of program at the grassroots level is the delivery platform. So in year 2020, we will provide a team-based assistance of high-risk family as our community referral system. Next, reorientation of stunting reduction is critical due to pandemic and our time limitation. We continue strengthening programs on 1,000 early days of life, plus ensuring preconception services is in place. Next, despite our full effort, there are some challenges in the implementation of specific and sensitive nutrition intervention from the central, regional to village levels that has not converged, both from the planning, budgeting processes, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. We acknowledge potential resources and funding sources that have been identified and mobilized optimally, but yet capitalized or used optimally. And we understand our limitation in terms of capacity of programmers, availability, quality, and utilization of data and research to develop appropriate policies. The other obstacle is about the issue on advocacy program, socialization, campaign, counseling activities, and community involvement that are still limited. Next, in this good opportunity, we would like to share what areas needed to be further explored by this initiative, Action Against Stunting Hub, to fill the gap. First, to prevent low birth weight and preterm birth by ensuring antenatal care quality, segmenting pregnant mothers at risk, providing information on more specific messages on food-based recommendation for pregnant mothers, and nutrition education for adolescent girls. To promote an effective intersectoral collaboration and implementation at program level, focusing on the first 1,000 days of life, particularly in the fulfillment of complete service package to specific subpopulation. In this regard, we acknowledge potential resource of having the involvement of university to assist subnational level for data literacy and analysis, and also to widen an active case findings of potential stunted children and to establish community-based referral system at village level. The other things is that to consider the inclusion of nutrition into universal health coverage, as financing is very important, and also to encourage policy-oriented research that appreciates collateral determinants of child stunting to break the intergenerational cycle of stunting. I think that is all from me, Bu Umi. Thank you for your kind attention. Back to you, Bu Umi.
Thank you, Prof. Rijal and Dr. Irma, and to represent the voice from Indonesia. And thank you all for your attention. Back to you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very comprehensive presentations. Thank you for that. So our next speakers are from Senegal. So Dr. Babacar Faye is the country lead of the hub. Babacar is a professor in parasitology at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Sheikh Anta Diop. Welcome, Babacar.
Merci beaucoup, Claire. Thank you, Claire. Are you talking French? As you have the translation.
I'm listening to the channel.
English. So we can switch. Today, I will speak in French. It is my official language and my native language. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Donc, je me félicite aujourd'hui d'être membre de ce hub et de participer à cette importante journée du 8 septembre que nous avons choisi pour parler un peu de la malnutrition au niveau national et au niveau international également et faire un plaidoyer dans ce sens-là. Pour la partie sénégalaise, donc, je vais donc faire une petite introduction pour un peu montrer l'engagement du pays. Et ensuite, je vais peut-être passer la parole au docteur Matidiane Camara, qui est du ministère de la Santé et qui va nous faire une présentation pour le cadre sénégalais, avec la vision sénégalaise dans la lutte contre la malnutrition et le retard de croissance. Alors, au niveau Sénégal, donc, cette diapositive montre un peu la prévalence de la malnutrition au niveau national. Donc, tout à l'heure, le docteur Camara va y revenir plus en profondeur, mais ça montre ici la disparité de cette malnutrition au niveau du pays, avec des zones qui sont plus touchées et d'autres qui sont moins touchées, tenant compte bien sûr de la disposition géographique des régions. Les régions les plus touchées étant les régions les plus lointaines, donc notamment la zone de sud au niveau de Kolda et de Kédougou, qui sont des zones pour lesquelles donc, la malnutrition est plus élevée, et au niveau central également des régions où on note beaucoup de malnutrition. Pour ce qui est de l'engagement politique, donc je pense qu'au niveau du Sénégal, nous avons un engagement très important à un niveau très élevé, notamment au niveau même de la présidence de la République, qui a mis en place plusieurs unités qui vont travailler et lutter sur la malnutrition, mais également au niveau du ministère de la Santé, qui a mis en place un département qui va lutter, qui a en charge la santé maternelle et la santé infantile. Et dans ce cadre-là, plusieurs plans stratégiques ont été mis en place pour lutter un peu contre la malnutrition, en particulier depuis 2001. Et de 2017 à 2021, nous avons actuellement un plan qui est en cours et tout à l'heure, le professeur Camara donc, va y revenir. Nous avons également des programmes de renforcement nutritionnel qui permettent également de lutter contre cela. La particularité sénégalaise, c'est que nous avons un partenariat très important avec notamment les organisations internationales telles que l'OMS, l'UNICEF ou la Banque mondiale, mais également avec les organisations, les ONG qui sont présentes au niveau du Sénégal et qui participent à l'action de la lutte contre la malnutrition. Une action importante, c'est vraiment ce qui se fait au niveau communautaire. Nous avons vraiment voulu décentraliser la lutte contre la malnutrition, mais également d'autres programmes de lutte contre les problèmes de santé, mais particulièrement pour la malnutrition. Donc, il y a une décentralisation assez importante au niveau régional, mais également au niveau des districts sanitaires, et même plus en profondeur au niveau des communautés, où nous avons l'implication des associations de femmes, des associations de jeunes et des associations communautaires qui participent à la lutte contre la malnutrition. Dans le cadre de cette activité qui est très importante, nous avons intégré bien sûr ce hub qui a donc la particularité de pouvoir répondre à des questions de recherche que nous nous posons jusqu'à présent parce que tout le monde l'a signalé depuis tout à l'heure. Malgré tous les efforts qui ont été consentis, la malnutrition constitue toujours un problème de santé publique et persiste. Donc, cela veut dire que donc, quelque part, il y a des choses à découvrir, à connaître et à mieux appréhender pour pouvoir donc améliorer les stratégies de lutte qui sont mises en place au niveau des différents pays. C'est dans ce cadre-là donc que ce hub a été mis en place avec vraiment une approche multidisciplinaire qui permettra de pouvoir mettre en œuvre des connaissances de plusieurs praticiens dans plusieurs domaines, de manière à pouvoir ressortir les difficultés et les impacts que chaque activité pourrait avoir, de manière à sortir donc des réponses qui pourront être utilisées, notamment dans la prise en charge et dans la prise de décision au niveau de notre communauté. Et cette opportunité que nous avons nous donne la possibilité de pouvoir travailler dans des domaines d'expertise qui n'existaient peut-être pas au niveau de notre pays, en particulier donc le domaine de share values, qui est un élément assez important qui permet de comprendre même les choses en profondeur. Et ceci donc permettra de pouvoir améliorer la prise en charge et l'activité de lutte que nous avons au niveau de notre pays. L'engagement assez important également à un niveau très élevé, donc comme je l'ai dit, au niveau présidentiel, mais également au niveau de la ministère de la Santé. Un engagement fort également d'accompagnement de nos institutions de recherche, notamment donc les universités, particulièrement celle dans laquelle je suis, l'université Cheikh Anta Diop, qui est la première université francophone en Afrique de l'Ouest, et qui, par le biais de son recteur et de son doyen, s'est fortement impliqué dans la mise en place de cette activité de recherche qui va pouvoir permettre d'avoir des résultats probants et qui aideront les décideurs politiques à une meilleure prise en charge de la malnutrition au niveau de nos pays. Nous avons également donc des partenariats, comme je l'ai dit, avec des organismes tels que l'UNICEF, tels que l'OMS également, qui participent à ce travail-là. L'autre élément qui est important, c'est l'engagement communautaire, comme je l'ai dit. Nous travaillons au niveau des communautés, et en particulier dans une communauté que je vais vous présenter tout à l'heure très rapidement, qui est la communauté rurale de Kaffrine. Et à ce niveau-là, donc, nous avons vraiment fait un gros effort de plaidoyer au niveau des communautés pour intégrer ces acteurs communautaires dans la lutte contre la malnutrition, qui se sont impliqués vraiment de façon assez importante, avec notamment donc des actions qui sont menées régulièrement de sensibilisation. Tout à l'heure, Francesco, dans sa présentation, a parlé de beaucoup de problèmes qui ont été rencontrés, mais un des problèmes que nous rencontrons très souvent dans nos pays, notamment liés à la pandémie du Covid, ce sont les fausses nouvelles qui sont véhiculées et qui ont un impact négatif sur les différentes stratégies de lutte que nous menons au niveau de nos différents pays, notamment sur la vaccination, par exemple. Et je sais qu'actuellement, donc, nous sommes en train de faire beaucoup de plaidoyer pour faire accepter déjà ces vaccinations contre le Covid, mais également faire en sorte qu'il n'y ait pas de corrélation négative entre ces vaccinations et les séances de vaccination classiques, donc le programme élargi de vaccination, qui touche beaucoup plus les enfants et qui, lorsqu'elle n'est pas effectuée correctement, donc pourrait entraîner des conséquences importantes dans la santé des populations et des enfants. C'est pourquoi donc l'engagement communautaire pour nous est assez important et nous essayons de mettre en place cela. Cette étude que nous menons, qui est assez innovatrice et qui va donc permettre de pouvoir apporter des réponses, nous la menons au niveau donc d'une zone qui est au niveau du centre du pays, qui est la zone de Kaffrine, qui est une zone qui est touchée par environ 26% de malnutrition, avec bien sûr des difficultés que nous avons sur le plan administratif, mais également sur le plan de la santé, avec un seul hôpital qui est disponible, un seul centre de santé et quelques postes de santé qui sont là, et qui constituent donc un terroir au niveau duquel donc, nous pouvons bien explorer tous ces éléments-là et qui permettront d'avoir des résultats qui aideront très certainement à la prise de décision politique, mais également au niveau national et international. Les impacts que nous attendons, donc, c'est des impacts au niveau de la santé des communautés, des impacts qui vont permettre aux différents pays de pouvoir améliorer ou en tout cas réorienter les stratégies qui sont mises en place dans la lutte contre la malnutrition. Un impact sur le plan académique qui permettra donc à tous les chercheurs de pouvoir mieux appréhender la malnutrition, de pouvoir proposer des stratégies et des solutions concernant cette malnutrition, de pouvoir traduire en stratégie de lutte les résultats que nous allons obtenir, avec cela donc permettre une meilleure amélioration de la santé des populations, mais surtout former de nouvelles générations de scientifiques, de professionnels de la santé qui auront vraiment une très bonne idée, une meilleure compréhension de la lutte contre la malnutrition, et ceci bien sûr dans l'objectif de pouvoir améliorer la santé de nos populations. Donc je vais m'arrêter à ce stade-là et passer peut-être la parole à ma collègue du ministère de la Santé, le Dr Mati Diagne Camara, qui va pouvoir vous décliner les stratégies nationales et un peu l'impact que le Covid a eu sur la lutte contre la malnutrition au niveau du Sénégal. Mati, Dr Mati Diagne Camara est donc du ministère de la Santé. Elle est nutritionniste. Elle est responsable de la direction de la santé de la mère au niveau du ministère de la Santé du Sénégal, et elle a en charge plus ou moins la mise en œuvre de la politique de lutte contre la malnutrition au niveau. Docteur Mati, je vous cède la parole.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Babacar, et bonjour à tout le monde. Donc, par mon nom, je remercie les organisateurs de cette journée de lutte contre la malnutrition chronique. Donc, et je vais partager avec vous la présentation que voici. Donc, concernant la réduction du retard de croissance, juste faire un petit rappel sur la malnutrition qui affecte sous différentes formes donc, les populations, donc constitue un problème de santé publique et impacte sur la santé et le développement, surtout pour les cibles les plus vulnérables, que sont les enfants, les adolescents, mais également les enfants de moins de 5 ans. Mais également, elle constitue une des principales causes de mortalité maternelle et infantile et survient dans plusieurs contextes, des contextes stables ou bien des contextes d'urgence, c'est le cas du Covid-19. Et cette malnutrition va résulter de l'interaction de plusieurs facteurs. Et un fait important, M. Francesco en a parlé tout à l'heure, c'est le double fardeau de la malnutrition. Donc le Sénégal, à l'instar des autres pays aussi, connaît ce double fardeau de la malnutrition avec coexistence de surpoids et de l'obésité, qui sont associés à des maladies non transmissibles, avec également ces carences nutritionnelles, surtout chez les cibles les plus vulnérables. Quelle est la situation nutritionnelle au Sénégal? Babacar en a parlé tout à l'heure. Si vous regardez ici sur cette diapositive, vous voyez que pour ce qui concerne la malnutrition aiguë, le Sénégal est dans une situation de précarité. Pour le retard de croissance, le problème qui se pose au niveau du Sénégal, c'est que nous sommes en deçà des 20%, mais vous voyez que depuis 2013, et même au-delà de 2013, cette situation elle est stationnaire. Il n'y a pas donc une évolution suivant les années donc, de cette malnutrition chronique vers une réduction. Et si vous voyez un peu, il y a des disparités au niveau régional. Et ces disparités au niveau régional sont marquées par une augmentation de la malnutrition aiguë, surtout dans les zones nord du pays, mais également une augmentation de la malnutrition chronique dans les zones au niveau du sud-est du pays. Donc, vous voyez ici sur cette diapositive, donc la malnutrition chronique qui survient surtout dans les zones au sud et à l'est du pays, donc qui sont en situation de crise par rapport à la malnutrition chronique. Ici, nous voyons un peu également, pour ce qui concerne l'allaitement maternel exclusif et la mise au sein précoce, qui impacte beaucoup sur l'alimentation des nourrissons et du jeune enfant, et qui peuvent avoir des conséquences par rapport à la survenue de malnutrition chronique. Vous voyez que pour ce qui concerne la mise au sein précoce, le Sénégal est à 34% en 2018, et pour l'allaitement maternel exclusif, on est à 46%. Donc, vous voyez qu'à ce niveau, il y a beaucoup d'efforts à faire d'ici 2025 si nous voulons atteindre les cibles mondiales de 2025. Pour ce qui est des carences en micronutriments, également, ces carences en micronutriments sont très importantes au niveau du pays. Pour ce qui concerne la carence en iode, vous voyez 50% des femmes en âge de reproduction ont une carence en iode et 39% chez les enfants de 6 à 12 ans. Pour la vitamine A également, seuls 43% des enfants de 6 à 23 mois donc, sont alimentés avec des aliments qui sont riches en vitamine A. Et la carence en fer constitue un problème de santé publique au Sénégal. Vous voyez que 71% des enfants de moins de 5 ans ont cette carence en fer. Et vous voyez ici sur cette carte, si on regarde pour l'ensemble des pays, des régions du pays, toutes les régions du pays ont dépassé le seuil de 40% fixé par l'Organisation mondiale de la santé. Donc, vous voyez que la carence en fer est un élément qui contribue davantage à la survenue donc, de la malnutrition chronique au niveau du Sénégal. Et vu cette situation, le Sénégal s'est engagé à l'instar de la communauté internationale aux objectifs de développement durable, surtout au niveau de l'objectif 2, qui consiste à éliminer la faim, assurer la sécurité alimentaire et améliorer la nutrition et promouvoir l'agriculture. Mais également, le Sénégal s'est engagé aux cibles mondiales, à atteindre les cibles mondiales de 2025. Et au niveau national, le Sénégal, à travers le plan Sénégal émergent au niveau de l'axe 2, qui met l'accent sur le développement durable, avec l'amélioration de l'état nutritionnel de la mère et de l'enfant, à travers la diversification des régimes alimentaires, l'augmentation des couvertures en services donc, de nutrition. Donc, le Sénégal s'est fixé ses objectifs à l'horizon de 2035 et au niveau du département de la nutrition, il y a eu l'élaboration du document de politique nationale de la nutrition, ceci défini, qui permet de définir les orientations stratégiques et les principes directeurs à suivre en matière de nutrition pour la période de 2015 à 2025, et ceci dans le but de mettre en œuvre donc, cet objectif du plan Sénégal émergent. Et compte tenu du caractère multidimensionnel de la nutrition, donc avec tous les causes multifactorielles, ce plan a défini une approche multisectorielle avec comme principe clé la mise en œuvre. Donc plusieurs secteurs ont été impliqués dans l'élaboration de ce document de politique de la nutrition. Et ce document de politique de la nutrition a été opérationnalisé par l'élaboration d'un plan multisectoriel de la nutrition. Et dans ce plan multisectoriel de la nutrition, plusieurs objectifs donc, ont été déclinés. Et vous voyez ici avec moi, le premier objectif, c'est la réduction d'au moins de 40% de la prévalence du retard de croissance donc chez les enfants de moins de 5 ans. Donc, d'ici 2025, nous devons atteindre au moins 10% de cette prévalence, de 10% de la prévalence du retard de croissance. Mais comme je l'ai dit dans la diapositive précédente, vous voyez que le retard de croissance, les taux de retard de croissance sont légèrement bas au Sénégal, mais la progression, elle est extrêmement lente, donc la situation reste stationnaire. Et en plus de ce retard de croissance, il y a également d'autres facteurs d'autres objectifs qui vont concourir à réduire ce retard de croissance. C'est la réduction de 30% des proportions d'enfants ayant un faible poids à la naissance, la réduction d'au moins 5% de prévalence de la malnutrition aiguë et porter à au moins 50% le taux d'allaitement maternel exclusif chez les enfants donc de moins de 5 ans, avec une réduction de 50% aussi de l'anémie et une réduction de 40% des carences des autres micronutriments tels que le iode, le zinc et la vitamine A, et la réduction d'au moins 20% de la prévalence de l'obésité chez les groupes vulnérables. Donc, tous ces efforts, beaucoup d'efforts sont en train d'être faits pour atteindre ces objectifs en 2025, mais comme vous serez d'accord tous avec moi que tous les efforts qui ont été donc entamés ont été freinés par la pandémie au Covid-19, et cette pandémie au Covid-19, comme l'a dit tout à l'heure M. Francisco, a beaucoup impacté sur les interventions, notamment les interventions de nutrition. Et lorsque la pandémie a eu lieu, beaucoup de facteurs ont également impacté sur la continuité et la disponibilité des services SRMENIA, et Babacar l'a dit tout à l'heure, ceci a été lié aux fausses informations qui ont été données aux populations, qui faisaient que les populations avaient une peur bleue d'aller dans les services de santé. Et donc, il fallait trouver des moyens innovants et pratiques pour fournir des services essentiels de qualité disponibles et contenus en nutrition à travers des systèmes d'alimentation de qualité, des systèmes de santé performants, mais également l'hygiène, l'assainissement et la protection sociale. C'est dans ce sens-là que le ministère de la Santé, à travers la direction de la santé de la mère et de l'enfant, a élaboré un guide SRMENIA, donc guide santé de la reproduction maternelle, infantile, néonatale et des adolescents et la nutrition, pour faciliter la continuité des services et la disponibilité des services, tout en mettant en avant la protection des prestataires, mais également la protection des bénéficiaires contre cette pandémie. C'est ainsi que des mesures de protection et d'hygiène ont été mises en place au niveau des centres et des unités de récupération et d'éducation nutritionnelle, aussi bien au niveau des structures de santé qu'au niveau de la communauté, pour la prise en charge de la malnutrition aiguë, mais également toutes ces mesures ont été mises en place au cours des conseils sur les pratiques de l'alimentation, de nourrisson et du jeune enfant. Et pour éviter donc cette fréquentation des populations, pour diminuer cette fréquentation des populations au niveau des structures, parce que déjà les populations avaient peur de venir au niveau des structures, pour éviter que les soins ne soient pas donnés, le Sénégal a décentralisé la prise en charge de la malnutrition et du sévère sans complication au niveau de la communauté. Et cette activité a été donc mise en œuvre par les structures de santé, mais en collaboration avec le dispositif communautaire qui est mis en place pour une prise en charge de la malnutrition. Mais également, nous avons rendu disponibles tous les intrants de prise en charge de la malnutrition et nous avons renforcé le dépistage de la malnutrition. Le dépistage actif au niveau des structures, mais également le dépistage au niveau de la communauté en utilisant le périmètre brachial et la recherche des œdèmes. Et en plus, nous avons mis en place des stratégies qui consistaient à apprendre au moment ou à l'accompagnante à prendre le périmètre brachial et à rechercher les œdèmes chez les enfants au niveau donc, des domiciles, au niveau des communautés, afin de pouvoir alerter très rapidement. Mais également, nous avons renforcé l'évaluation de l'état nutritionnel par les acteurs communautaires, donc qui, au cours des visites à domicile, vont évaluer l'état nutritionnel par la prise du périmètre brachial ou bien la recherche des œdèmes. Et en plus, nous avons renforcé aussi l'éducation nutritionnelle par les acteurs communautaires auprès des mamans, mais également auprès des accompagnants. Nous avons aussi assuré une promotion de la consommation suffisante d'aliments nutritifs, donc à travers la farine composée, enrichie, etc. Et nous avons offert des poudres de micronutriments pour fortifier les aliments, donc surtout chez les enfants de 6 à 23 mois. Et nous avons également intensifié la supplémentation en vitamine A de routine et le déparasitage chez les enfants donc de moins de 5 ans. Et nous avons aussi renforcé les actions essentielles en nutrition et les actions essentielles en hygiène par la promotion de la consommation d'eau potable, le lavage des mains à l'eau, au savon avant et après le contact avec les enfants. Quelles sont les perspectives donc d'ici 2020, 2025 et 2030, surtout en période de pandémie? C'est de renforcer la multisectorialité pour que tous les secteurs qui interviennent dans la nutrition puissent jouer pleinement leur rôle, mais ceci nécessite donc un renforcement institutionnel par la mise en place donc de lignes budgétaires, donc de mobilisation de ressources au niveau de ces secteurs pour leur permettre de mettre en œuvre les interventions, renforcer surtout les stratégies de prévention, surtout des carences en micronutriments et de la malnutrition chronique, en mettant en place des actions sensibles à la nutrition, renforcer la participation des collectivités et des populations sur ces efforts qui sont fournis pour la nutrition, prendre en compte le double fardeau nutritionnel et le cycle intergénérationnel de la malnutrition, assurer une bonne sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle par la mise en place de systèmes alimentaires durables, favorables à la santé et au bien-être nutritionnel, mais surtout aussi mettre un accent, M. Francesco l'a dit, sur la réglementation de tous ces produits commercialisés et qui sont destinés aux nourrissons, aux jeunes enfants, à travers la publicité, l'étiquetage et améliorer donc la collaboration publique-privée. Et enfin, renforcer la prise en charge de la malnutrition par des protocoles réactualisés et adaptés au contexte de COVID-19. Donc voilà un peu ce que je voudrais partager avec vous et je vous remercie et nous restons disponibles éventuellement s'il y a des questions ou éventuellement des éclaircissements. Donc je vous remercie encore, le ministre de la Santé vous remercie encore de nous avoir fait participer à ce. Merci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mati. So I give the floor to Claire.
Abakar, Dr. Mati, thank you so much for joining us. That was fascinating presentations, and I hope you stay for the next session. As we move on to the last session, our roundtable, this is a bit pressurized for the panelists now. We've had some excellent presentations. We've given our marching orders from the keynote speakers. The countries have fleshed out some of these issues about what's happening. And now is our chance to talk about what are our perceptions, what actions would we prioritize, how could we make this work? So I reckon this is the hardest part of the whole day. So who would like to start? Oh, Abigail, you're right next to me. I'm going to pick on you. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Very happy to come in. I'm just going to switch off the translation. Apologies.
Yeah,
so, thanks very
so
much.
essentially, it's like, what are your thoughts? What do you think from your perspective, where you're coming from? What can we do and how can we make it happen?
Great. Thank you. I think the first thing I would say, and this comes slightly from having just stepped out of a government department where I've been overseeing a nutrition policy, I think the first thing is we need to make sure that we're being quite joined up and relatively simple in the message of the action that needs to be taken. So there's a lot behind the scenes and there's a lot underneath what it takes to address malnutrition, but a joined up message which cuts across the different forms of malnutrition and it can send a very clear and concise message to governments, donors and others about what to prioritise is really fundamentally important. And linked to that also to ensure it's quite clear what the difference is between business as usual and doing something in support of nutrition. Now, one of the areas that my new organisation, the World Food Programme, has given particular priority to is around this question of social protection. It's a really important mechanism to reach those who are particularly at risk of malnutrition and to make sure that we're leaving no one behind, but also to address the economic barriers to good nutrition that many of the people who've asked questions or the panelists have made a comment on. Now, WFP has given particular focus to working very closely with governments and actually had requests from nearly 50 governments last year for support in adapting or introducing social protection mechanisms that will address nutrition issues. So the Fill the Nutrient Gap tool pioneered by WFP is a very practical way to walk governments through the question of what is the problem when it comes to access to affordable diets by different population groups, and what are the practical policy and program solutions that could be taken. And it's this kind of very practical action that I think is really important. The work that your team is doing to build evidence is really fundamental, but in the meantime, joined up messaging, coherent advice on what's needed, and very practical help to work through policy and program solutions is a really fundamental priority. So this is a great initiative, and I hope that joined up with all of the other messages around malnutrition, that we can really kind of set off towards the Nutrition for Growth Summit with a very joined up call of what it takes to end not just stunting, but malnutrition in all of its forms, including wasting, overweight, and obesity.
Great, thank you for that. So it's very much about prioritization within this context of joining up. Okay, thank you for that, Abigail. Who was next? I think it was Purnima.
Hi, thank you, Claire, and congratulations both, to you on the launch of the initiative. I mean, I know it's been launched for a while, but the Action Against Stunting Day is wonderful, and it's really great to meet all of the country collaborators after that first meeting with all of you in Hyderabad. I forget now, two or 3 years ago, but congratulations on this. It's wonderful to see where the work has come and how you're leading the charge in a sense and getting us to focus on this. I guess I'd like to draw our attention to the successes that we've seen in stunting reduction. And I've been part of research teams that have been studying success cases in stunting within India. And also, we've been doing several of those, not me personally, but other colleagues in looking at them in other countries globally. And I just think we have a remarkable set of case studies right now, several of which actually were summarized in the Lancet Nutrition series that just launched in February 2021. And I just feel like we're not getting enough play in the nutrition community. I'm still seeing people reference it's not a bad thing. We still talk about the previous Lancet series, which in a sense forced us to think in an intervention delivery framework. The new analyses give us that, but they also help us see that change is possible when different things come together. But they also remind us very, very sharply, and I think the nutrition community had really forgotten about this, how important solving poverty, inequity, and food insecurity is to improving the lives of children. Because just because those interventions aren't directed to children, they're directed to households. I think it became very easy for the core nutrition community to step away from them. But we can never forget that children grow up in households, and households that are poor and households that are food insecure are affected not just in terms of those shortages, but they have very profound implications for what happens inside households in terms of supporting families on caregiving, on enabling sort of access to foods within households and things like that. So for me, the success cases, and we have, I think there's a collection of at least 20 of those at this point in time across a couple of the research groups that have been looking at it. They remind us how important it is that we support families and parents, because that's where children grow, right? That's where they spend their lives. And so we have and the pandemic, I think, has also reminded us very sharply about that. But I think, in terms of prioritization and framing, we have, the series, I think, offers a nice action framework. It's not divorced from anything that was there before. It's just a reminder that we need to bring things together, to create a whole. So that's one thing. I would love to see, for example, for the 3 countries that you have here, an analysis of the stunting reduction strategies that they have in place vis-a-vis the evidence. I mean, I did sort of a quick check mark of that for India, and India's stunting reduction strategy, for example, doesn't really acknowledge poverty and food insecurity in sort of indirect ways. In Indonesia, it's referenced very directly, and in Senegal, I didn't get a chance to sort of understand all the interventions, but I valued the fact that it's a comprehensive it's a strategy that aims at multiple outcomes. So I think we have to remember that investing in the fundamentals of alleviating poverty and food insecurity, especially for the poorest, is going to be really, really important to achieving our stunting reduction goals, because addressing inequities has been a very, very central part of the successes in countries that saw stunting decline. So I really hope that through your initiative, through the advocacy that we engage in as a community of evidence-based minded people, that we also take into account the evidence that exists on the successes and hold them into what we bring together to governments and to policymakers. So let me leave us with that, and if we have a chance, I'll come back later with some other thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, Purnina, that was great. And it's very much identifying these really critical, important priorities and how we want to march them forward. So I think that's thank you for that. So let's see, I think, was it Paul that was next? And then Nicola. So, there's.
Yeah. Hi, Claire. And this has been a fascinating conversation. Hopefully my signal holds out. It's been a little patchy, so apologies if it does. Just one of the things that I think, that always comes to front of mind in these conversations is around the language that we use to communicate. And we often talk in a very technical way. And I think one of the things that we really need to do is bridge well into other spaces in order to really address some of these issues in more integrated ways. And so, talking around food and how we engage with food then can have access for everyday people that can then navigate and communicate some of the complexity of this space. And so things around, how we have, good food for all, that indicates how we can also address some of these complexities is really important. I also think, it's great to hear a lot about the systems-based approach. I think connecting dots between agriculture, food systems, climate, nutrition, food security, all of these things needs to really continue to happen, because on the ground level, we're not tackling them separately. And so I think, the UN Food Systems Summit is a great opportunity for this, but we also need to bring this into the specialized areas where we are bringing in those actors to also be talking about that. And, I'm at AGRF this week, and AGRF's got, 8,000 people registered, 150 here with many heads of state from across the African continent and globally. This is where this conversation around stunting needs to be connected to the conversation around production and agriculture. And so it's really good to start seeing that happen, but we need to continue to lean into that and really accelerate that the best we can. So thank you, Claire.
So how do you think we should do that? Is it at these big global summits? How do you think we're going to be able to make these connections?
Are you asking me, Claire?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the way that I see it is it's a language question to start with, because I think, as an actor that works across the space rather than deep into one sector, I'm not I feel technically incompetent in many of the conversations. And so it's about how do we create those access points in order to do it. And I think it is at the big summits, but it's also on the ground. And I think on the ground, increasingly, you do see the way things are rolled out is they're done in an integrated way, because people eat food, they don't kind of engage. But there has been great, big examples where it's been also treated in isolation. That's been through the UN system, through other systems, where you go to one person for one part of it, and then you go to another person for another part, and then another, because everyone has mandates and everyone has different focuses. So I think, Claire, it's a both. It's these summits which set the agenda and the tone and the language, and then the ability to bring people together. And then it's also on the grassroots, really bringing together and seeing how, when you combine actions, it drives it forward. An example for us has been here at AGRF, bringing chefs into the conversation with the agriculture space, and you have this conversation around food. And somebody yesterday, a chef from Kenya, raised nutritional issues around this, and was really talking about Why in a country that produces so much food is there people still not getting the right nutrients, and how do they understand that? And that conversation then comes down to what are we growing, how are we using it, how are we preparing it, which all has an impact around stunting as well. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, Paul, thank you. I mean, discourse always leads practice. When you change the discourse, the practice follows behind it. And so you've raised a really, really important point. Thank you. So Nicola, to you.
Thank you, Claire, and congratulations to the team for putting together such an important and informative session today. I think a lot of the points that I had noted as I was listening to the speakers have already been very eloquently raised by other panel members. But maybe I'd like to just be really positive, because there was a lot of positivity in what we heard today. It's quite easy to become overwhelmed when we look at the state of malnutrition globally and see the direction in which the statistics are trending. It's easy to become disheartened. However, today I had a lot of positivity. I think despite the horrendous situation that COVID has created globally, it does also present opportunities that was really nicely highlighted earlier. Opportunities to embed nutrition into the community support systems that are being put in place as a result of the pandemic. This pandemic has really got the global attention on health, and we have an opportunity there in the nutrition world to tap into that and to embed nutrition into whatever follows following the recovery from this pandemic. It's also really encouraging to hear that there are funds available. Yes, they may be badged as for climate change or for other global activities that have got the world's attention, and it's about how we are smart in the way that we present nutrition as a solution, as part of the solution to some of these other big global challenges that will help us to get the funding that we need to deliver nutrition programs. I kind of feel that we need a Greta Thunberg of the nutrition world to help us do that, to really champion nutrition. Because as Simon mentioned, nutrition feels like it has this orphan status. I often refer to nutrition as a Cinderella subject. Everybody knows it's there. It often falls in terms of policy and government. It often falls between the gaps between health, departments of health, departments of public health, departments of agriculture. Everybody acknowledges there's an issue there. And the data that we have globally, present a very clear picture that we have an issue there, but nobody really takes responsibility. It's an orphan subject, and I think getting it out of that orphan status into the mainstream is really key. And I think the opportunities we have at the moment are the summits that are coming up, the UN Food Systems Summit that's coming up later this month, and the Nutrition for Growth Summit that's coming up at the end of the year. These are real opportunities to get the voices heard. My final point is that in all of our discussions today, it's really clear to me, and from my own research in Northwest Pakistan, it's really clear that coming up with solutions, global solutions, addressing the food system is absolutely right. But those solutions also need to be context specific, and hearing local voices, hearing voices of the community who are better placed than any of us experts to identify what the solutions are within their own context is really important. And I'll leave it there.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that's an excellent point to end on. Do one of the countries, Umi or Bharati, do you want to jump in on some of that?
Hello. Good morning, Prof. Claire.
Dadi, how are you?
Oh, yeah, fine. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning, all the speakers. Very fantastic. I hear in pandemic COVID-19. We have already, because Minister of Health responsible for the stunting data. Yeah, every year stunting data every year. May I share this one? Yeah, this is the Indonesian data prediction prevalence stunting 2020, Professor Claire and all the participants, because this is important things, Indonesian situations. because Prof. Damanik in BKKBN is the leaders now in BKKBN, because Ministry of Health responsible from the implementation of Presidential Decree number 27 2021 to every year the Ministry of Health to responsible to publish data, especially for the district and city in all Indonesian, almost 514 district and city. And then we have the World Bank disbursement link indicator coordinate with the Office of the Presidents every year. Yeah, this is the challenge because the situation of the COVID pandemics. Yeah, we not to survey or study in the 2020, and then Minister of Finance establishing the regional incentive for the money, especially for the district and city, and the Minister of Fire to the action nutrition specific and sensitive. This is the important things from the Minister of Health.
So Dadi, what would you tell, say, the World Bank and some of these international finance organizations? You know, if you had their ear, what would you say to solve stunting?
Oh yeah, World Bank.
Yeah, what would you tell them? What would you bring them in? Like, you know, is it a bottom up, some of the people are talking about, or is it just, you know?
Yeah, because the money from the soft loan with the Indonesian government already to one program, especially from the disbursement link indicator from the Indonesia to publish district and city, and then World Bank give the soft loan directly from through Ministry of Finance to give the money all district in Indonesia. This is the for flare. Yeah, and then the publication from the Ministry of Health. Yeah, and then the Ministry of Finance give the regional incentive fund. Yeah, this is one indicator used in the district. This is the World Bank. If no the data, World Bank no give the money. This
so you think you need stronger indicators on the ground then?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, this is the yeah, because we talk with the COVID pandemic problem with the, and then in the we have prediction stunting in here 2020 the stunting rate in 2020 26.92%, a decrease 75% to compare with the 2019 Prof. Claire. Yeah, this is the all variable because we 15 models, 3 candidates, final model. Yeah, Bali Bankes and the Bureau of Statistics to discuss more long, almost 10 months. Yeah, to elaborate the predictive stunting of Indonesia, and then 5 to the variable stunting 2019, married woman at less than 80 years, children at 11 months or breastfeed, children at 23 months consume 4 or more food groups. The child is not examined or treated for the reason of all service. Ever married woman graduate from the high school. This is the significant, yeah, because we 10 months with the Bureau of Statistics and all the expert statistic to predictive, and then this year in September the president have the forum with the all ministry because the stunting target in Indonesia to talk with the 23 ministry responsible for the stunting in Indonesia, and then to launch in Indonesia from the Ministry of Health to speak with president because to predictive stunting rate 2020 almost to 0.75%. This is the important things, and then this is the target. Yeah, because my president still 40%, 25 until to 27% per year, and then and now Ministry of Health still progress with the research study prevalent in national and province. However, the Ministry of Health want to continue still 2 months district and city. this is and still progress. Thank you very much. This is yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Toddy. That was amazing. So you're giving us straight from the field, really, what's kind of happening on, what kind of information you need, and how decisions are being made around that specific information. And you know what? It could be time for a much more joined up approach from the donors, how they deliver this information, what metrics they're looking for, and are these metrics, you know, correct? Are we generating the correct evidence? But anyway, thank you, Dottie, because you brought the evidence piece screaming into this roundtable. Yeah. So now, Patraleka, do you want to come in on some of this? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. It's been absolutely great. I've been listening to all the speeches from the morning, and nice to see a lot of friends and fellow advocates of nutrition like Purnima and Bharti, and also been very, very nice listening to the presentations from Indonesia and Senegal, the country. And to me, I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm not an academic and really a field person, so I'll come in from there. What leaps out at me is, what you mentioned, Claire, right in the beginning, Claire, but the syndemic, the linkages, between the nutrition issue and all the other issues. Outside of I think the specialist circle, this point is not really, gets through in the public conversation. And that's where I think a lot of the problems come in. The other thing, which is also, I think, listening to all the speakers, what's very clear is that in each of these countries, there is no really a national picture. There's a regional picture, there's a sub-regional picture. So different regions, different sub-regions, different communities, different socio-demographic, cohorts are actually, responding to the COVID pandemic and all the other, factors differently. And I think as a journalist, what I'm really looking for is the granular picture. Because, for instance, I think Bharti mentioned the National Family Health Survey, the latest one which we've had in India. It's okay, it's only the partial picture, 22 states, and it doesn't include major states like Uttar Pradesh, 200 million people. It's also a poor state. But whatever we have on the specific issue of child, nutrition, it's not looking good. And I think Purnima and many other experts have talked about this, in the national media space and also in the international media space. And I, for instance, would like to know why, this district is doing well and why not that district is not doing well. So the granular insights, what are the specific hyper-local reasons? And I mean, it's just a guess. I think what happens is, sometimes in these big reports, I think the granular data is probably there, but it's not very easily accessible, publicly accessible. And then it probably gets filtered out as it goes up. So what you eventually get is a kind of, slightly generalized picture, which is of course helpful for the macro details, but I still think I would really, in terms of, action points, I really suggest that we get, have these granular pictures. And the equity dimension, the economic reasons, which were mentioned, I think is absolutely critical. Some time ago, I wrote a column on why doesn't hunger make headlines. It's everywhere. We're reading about it. Why isn't it in the headline space? And then I realized sort of malnutrition, starvation, deaths make headlines, not malnutrition. And we've got to understand why is that so. And I have not been able to travel very much, but I did some visits among the urban poor in slums in Delhi. And what I found, it's not that parents don't want to give their children, but they're saying when they don't, and countries like India, and probably Indonesia and Senegal also, we must also remember that we have a vast majority informal sector. So even as the economy is recovering, not everybody is getting, most people don't have a work contract. They're getting half their salary, sometimes even a percentage. Now, this is affecting food budgets. We also have food inflation. So, I mean, I've had mothers in slums in South Delhi, which is, where I live, and which has a very posh, Tony areas. Right next to that, people telling me, when I've gone into their houses, that my children, want fruit and milk, but I've not been able to give it to them. the subsidized food, which comes as mostly cereals. So I think these are some of the grassroots, vignettes, and the grassroots doesn't necessarily mean remote villages, that also, but also the urban poor. I think it's extremely important. We must know the reasons, the hyper local reasons. And in terms of the policy making, I think it's good to have a national, thing. But I personally believe, from what I've seen, about 30 years of work experience as a journalist, that we definitely need to, give importance to the local strategies. Whether it's food, whether it's, anything else, the linkages. The local people need to be on the high table. If it affects them, then they also need to have their say, and not always have their say mediated through others. That also. So I would really go for the, let's prioritize the granular picture, the local, the hyper-local insights alongside all the others. So I mean, right now, I think it's been very interesting to be part of discussion, and lovely to, catch up with you again. Thanks.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We're going to have to wrap up now because we're a little bit over, but is there any last voices? Is there anyone else that wants to kind of come in on this? Okay, I mean, I think it's been really interesting because you've taken the kind of the very directives that came in the first session, and you've kind of softened them out a bit. So here we've talked about the discourse, we've talked about the discourse leading practice, we've talked about communities being involved in some of these programs and projects. We've talked about evidence not actually reflecting the reality, and evidence not filtering up enough so decision makers can make proper decisions, and either if that's linking to other funders or indeed within their own kind of national governments. So I think it's been really successful. So what we're going to try to do is to take all these voices. It's all recorded, so don't worry if I've missed what you've said. And we're going to create a narrative from this, particularly from this section of the event. So I just want to thank everybody for participating. I mean, I think it's just been a great morning, and I've been really delighted. And of course, I have to thank the comms team at the Hub and LIDC for all their amazing hard work on this event over the year. But Alessia and Shireen and Goon and Chelsea, and equally, we have to thank the country teams and their hub managers, because they have really, really, really worked hard to broaden this event out, to reach communities, to engage with communities on what actually Action Against Stunting means. So this is the first of something. We'll put together these narratives, we'll send it around for comments and suggestions. And I just want to thank you for your time this morning. It's been a great event from our perspective, all the more so because of all the great comments that you've given us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.
So I think we're going to be free to go.